Hey guys, so this next set of videos I'm going to be doing here will be on the thing that we as humans need to do so deeply. That's communicate. Now you might want to go ahead and get a notepad, a couple sheets of paper, bring up a blank Word doc on your computer, whatever it is you can take notes on. Alright, you can go ahead and pause this video while you get things to write down, get everything ready, alright? Now, this is all taken from a presentation I do at emergency preparedness fairs and symposiums and on contract to different organizations to teach them about communications. So you're not going to get the full PowerPoint presentation with all the fancy bells and whistles. You're just going to get me talking. However, it is available online at theassetcenter.com, and then you look at the on the banner of the Asset Center, and you look for emergency preparedness fairs. You go in there, and you'll find, by looking around, you'll find a whole bunch of different PowerPoints in there and videos on emergency preparedness that I've done. But you look for the one for communications, and that will be this here. I'm going to be going over here. So now, what are the ways that you communicate with your loved ones? Normally in class I'd say, give me some examples, and I ask people to give me examples. And you get a wide range of answers. But right now, go ahead and write down any answers you come up with. Oh, and by the way, it's best to do this with your family. That way everybody suggests and adds stuff. Now go ahead and pause this video while you write stuff down. All right? Now, what types of emergencies can you think of that would impact your being able to communicate with your loved ones? Go ahead and write these down and pause the video if you need to. A good example of an event that interfered with communications was when Hurricane Katrina struck the southeastern United States back in August of 2005. The impact on communications was dramatic. And because of that, a report was commissioned on what happened. They determined that many agencies had jumped on the cell phone bandwagon, but didn't plan on the vast numbers of civilians using their cell phones and tying up the system so that nobody could really communicate. They concluded that the three most significant disasters for communications was going to be hurricanes, winter storms, and earthquakes. Problem was that back in DC, they didn't consider the effect of wildfires and how it affects the whole system in most of the rest of the country, especially in California. But back a few years ago, there was a big fire in the state of Montana, and basically everyone referred to the fact that the entire state of Montana was burning. There were so many fires going on and were joining up that it was a mess. Now you wonder, well, how can fires affect communications? Well, besides everybody trying to communicate, think of your power lines. Fires underneath it, melting it, telecommunication lines. We'll get to that point of the telecommunication lines here shortly. Now, I'm not going to try to pick on anybody. When I said shortly, I mean right now. I'm not trying to pick on anybody, but just trying to get a point across. Do you really know how your cell phone works? Most people think that they work like simple radios. Hello? Yes. Contacting one to the other. No, it doesn't work that way. They don't connect directly one to another. The caller A gets on his cell phone, calls. It's called a cell phone because it goes to a cell tower, which operates a little cell. Goes to that cell tower, it doesn't transmit right off again. It connects to a landline, goes to a switching center, which routes it and finds where the cell phone or landline number that you're trying to call is. So if you're trying to call a cell tower, another cell phone, it's still got to go through the switching center, just like two people on regular landlines calling each other. Everything goes through the switching centers, which means it has to use landline cables. Now, VoIP phones, voice over internet protocol, same thing. It's got to use the fiber optic or the T1 trunk lines or whatever it is to go from point to point. Fire can affect these, earthquake can affect these, flooding can affect them. Now, for national level disasters, FEMA and DHS can block non-first responder cell phones from accessing the cell towers. States can do the same thing for their state. So if you don't have what's known as a GITS or a WPS cell phone, you're out of luck, because those are the only phones that automatically are allowed access to the system when DHS flips the switch. So what else can you think of that would cause you from being able to use your phones? Any guesses? Write them down, because you need to think about these later. Power outages. Power goes out. The switching center has no power then. The cell towers. Not all the cell towers have battery backup or have generators to power them. Back during Y2K, the cell towers that were on the Bank of America data center complex in Concord, California, had to bring in generators because they were, for Y2K, Bank of America was changing out all the batteries in their battery room, which huge rooms, which was the backup for all their computers. So basically how they worked there, little side story here, the power came in, went through transformers, charged the batteries, from the batteries went to inverters, which turned back into 120 volts, 240 or whatever they needed to power the 5 buildings on the campus there. When the power went off, everything was already pulling from the batteries, so there was no interruption in the computers. And they had big generators that would kick in and start feeding power back into the batteries, so it never went down. But when they pulled all the batteries offline in the evenings to replace them, they shut the whole place down, and they brought in their own generators to power the computer labs and the server farms and everything else. But Bank of America wasn't powering the cell towers, so the cell towers had to bring in their own generators. Food for thought. Vehicle collisions with power poles, utility poles. Yeah, if the phone lines are not buried and they're suspended above, someone takes out a power pole and drops all the lines on it, that area now has no phone communication through to go to the switching center. Fire. Started mentioning it before. Fire can burn the poles down. They can burn the stations down. They can heat up around the cell towers that are out in the remote areas and overheat the equipment, causing it to shut down. Earthquakes can shake everything, knock power poles down, destroy the buildings that the switching centers are in. Interesting thing happened in California during the 1971 Silmar earthquake. Nearly every switching center in Southern California went offline because nobody had cell phones at the time. They all had landlines. And landlines, your phone sat on top of the receiver tabs to disconnect the phone. Well, when it came off, the phone would engage and you'd talk. Well, when an earthquake happened, they'd bounce off. All the phones came on at the same time. The surge on the switching stations caused them to shut themselves down. That's why, until everybody hung their phones up, they couldn't turn all the switching centers on back on. So if yours came on, you had a better chance of calling long distance than you did across town, because all the local switching centers, most of them are still out of order. Remember that when it comes later on here. Storm damage, ice, snow, flooding. Ice on the lines can drop the communication lines. Snow can build up on the roof of the switching centers, collapsing them. Floods can wash away power poles, the communication poles, sides of the mountains, cause avalanches or floods down, mudslides, take out the poles. They can flood the switching centers. They can flood power stations and thereby cause a power outage. High winds. You ever seen the lines whipping in the high winds? Trees can fall down on towers. They can fall down on buildings. So, terrorism events, vandalism. Key point, San Jose, California. It's about 8 years ago now. Somebody decided they wanted to steal copper wiring. And they climbed down inside of a communications manhole. Hey, communications, copper wire, phone lines are copper. So I'm going to go down and I'm going to steal copper lines between a couple of these manholes, cut it, pull it through, steal it, go, sell it. Problem was, it was fiber optic. They went and they cut it. For 2 days, a lot of areas in San Jose, Silicon Valley, hey, the internet capital of the world, they lost a lot of their communications. So those are just some of the things that can impact your communications. Now, if cell phones are shut down, and most likely landlines, how are you going to communicate with your loved ones? Start writing down how you think you're going to communicate. Okay, there are several ways. Not all of these are going to work. Email. If it's just the phones that are down, but the internet is still back up, you can send emails. Text messaging. During Katrina, some text messages were getting through when no voice calls were, because the system was all tied up. People trying to access it. For short distance communications, you can go to Walmart or Home Depot or Lowe's or Sports Authority or Big Five Sporting Goods. Those walkie-talkie radios they sell there, they're called FRS or FRS/GMRS. That's Family Radio Service or General Mobile Radio Service. And they say, oh yeah, we got a 21-mile range on it. Well, that 21 miles, if you're up on a peak and the other person's on a peak 21 miles an hour, you got a straight line of sight. Yeah, you could communicate that way. But if you're in town, get trees in the way. So these are not very powerful. These are like half-watt radios. So they don't have a lot of output. But they're good for local things. Like if you're at an amusement park, you can usually get to work it anywhere around the amusement park and communicate with your kids as they go running around. Better than that, ham radio. And now there's DStar, which is digital ham radio. Now I want to interject something here that I just came up that wasn't in my original presentation. I just came across some information recently, courtesy of a YouTube channel called Corsair's Trainers. Now, Steve at Corsair Trainers did a video recently on a product called GoTether Mesh. That's G-O capital T-E-N-N-A space capital M-E-S-H. It's a product that's sort of like a Bluetooth product or a Wi-Fi product that is 2 units, 4 units, whatever. It's basically come in a pair when you buy them, but you can gang them together. And basically, well, if you go to to their site and look at it, it says chat, text, and GPS. GoTether Mesh is a their smart mesh protocol powers private one-to-one or group chats or public emergency broadcasts to all users nearby up to a 4-mile range. Plus, the free GoTether app includes detailed offline maps for any region in the world. Sounds pretty cool. It is a bit expensive. I went and found it on Amazon. It's $179 for a pair of them. I haven't had a chance to buy them yet. My wife gave me the dirty eye when I mentioned it, so I haven't bought it yet. I'll probably wind up being my only Christmas present this year. But hey, if it works, it works. When I do get a chance to review the product, I will put out a review video on it. But if you go to like Amazon, you can, like I said, it has it on there for $179. They come in color-coded ones. You buy a pair. There's a blue one and a green one in the one, and then an orange and a purple in another one. But you can get multiple sets of them, and you can get them to work together. It works without cell service, 24-hour battery, and it works with both Android and iOS systems. Back to the presentation. Ham radio and DStar. Ham radio is analog. That's old-fashioned tubes, crystals, and stuff. There's no digitizing the signal. It's just radio waves. DStar is digital. Everything's digitized. So even though you could be broadcasting on the same frequency as a ham radio operator, he cannot understand. All he hears is just static noise. He can't hear you. You can't hear him. That's the difference between digital and analog. They don't communicate to each other that way. For the DStar, there's also an app for your Motorola, whatever phones you have, your other phones. And I'm not sure if they have it yet for the iPhone. I think they do by now, but it's on the systems. Okay. Now ham radio uses a repeater for long distance, where you talk on it, it goes up, hits the repeater, turns around and broadcasts it back out on 10 frequencies off. And so someone else on the same setup, they transmit on one frequency and they receive on the other. So they work it off of the repeaters. Repeaters can be linked one to another. There's one in California that goes for over 100 miles of just repeaters just down the Pacific coast. Now, DStar uses what's called a gateway. A gateway acts as a repeater, but its primary function is as a gateway, and they're called gateways. You can rebroadcast locally, or it connects to the internet and broadcasts out another gateway somewhere else. When I was first introduced to this, a friend of mine had just gotten it on his phone, and he goes, "Check this out, guys," and he punches in and brings up the gateway in California on Mount Diablo, and from it brings up the gateway out in Illinois, where he grew up as a kid. And a friend of his has had the same app on his phone, and he's able to talk to his friend not on a phone, but on the app using the DStar, using the radio wave signals to hit the gateway through the internet, out the gateway, and talk to his friend in Illinois. You can do there are gateways in Japan, England, France, Germany. Most states in the United States have a gateway on it. Utah was the first state to totally cover the entire state with gateway coverage, part of a DHS grant. Now, for both ham radio and DStar, an FCC license is required. To get that license, you do not need to know Morse code. The licenses are good for 10 years, and you can renew them online. Equipment costs have come way down for ham radio. DStar being a new medium is still a bit more expensive than some of the basic ham radio equipment. Now, ham radio is the original social network. You've probably seen some of the old movies and the TV shows like MASH, where they were communicating via ham radio from Korea to the United States and, doing different things with it. World War II, they were using ham radio to communicate with soldiers and get messages to families back here in the United States. Same thing with the Vietnam War. All right, there are clubs for ham radio. Most major cities have them. Most minor cities have them. Also, there's all sorts of help available for ham radio. Tons of YouTube channels on it, and plenty of people explaining how to use the equipment, how to fix things, how to build antennas, how to do all sorts of fun stuff on it. Okay. Also, ham radio is so important that even the government uses it as a backup plan to internet communications. It's called MARS, Military Auxiliary Radio System. With MARS, you're going to love this. They can send emails. That's called packet delivery. In fact, your computer is based on ham radio packet delivery system. So basically, analog came first. They made a computer, and now ham radio is going digital as well to work with the computers. But computers, email system stuff is based off of ham radio technology. Now, communications plan. You need to have a communications plan ahead of time. That way, when something happens, you can stay in touch and you're not going, what do I do? What do I do? All right? So, on the next video, we will pick up here, starting with developing a communications plan. That'll be part 2. In the meantime, stay safe and keep preparing. Very important here now, don't jump off yet. If you like this video, don't jump off. Very good thing, important thing coming up here. If you like this video, go ahead and click the red subscribe button. Then push the little gray bell that'll appear. Clicking that bell will make sure you get notified of any new videos. But the important thing here is you really should share these emergency preparedness videos with your friends, co-workers, relatives, anybody. Share it on Facebook, Instagram, the link to it. Sharing means something very important to you. What it means is your friends, your neighbors, whatever, have a chance to get prepared themselves. And what is that important to you for? It means they won't come knocking on your door for help, wanting to take your supplies from your family. So once again, keep preparing and stay safe. All right? Until then, I will see you on some of my other videos. I'll hopefully have another one here coming up here on part 2 here in the next several days.